What happened to the chorus? I thought we were gonna do like a mixing on way of hi.
Hi. Welcome to In Frame. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Everyone.
Why do you always say everyone?
Yeah, everyone is our audience. Welcome to
In Frame.
In frame.
So, what are we talking about today?
Today,
guys? Oh,
today we're gonna be a bit.
Chad is leading.
yes.
Thank you, Brian. I feel like today I wouldn't say we're in a bit of a silly mood. I think we're in a more
Relax.
relaxed kind of fashion. You see, it's just three of us. Unfortunately, no guests today.
Yeah.
Is it unfortunate? I think it's a good thing. And
Yeah. To have us together.
Us. No,
Yeah.
We were thinking about it this week, and we've what besides architecture, what is the one thing that we have in common?
1, 2, 3.
I'm gonna rehearse, guys.
And I think we were talking about what our favorite films are.
Yeah.
Anyone want to like give an opinion? There is no wrong opinion.
Yeah.
In terms of are you asking us what is our favorite?
Yeah, what is our favorite film?
Favorite films?
I think I have to think about the director first.
Yeah.
I think for me, personally, my favorite director is James Cameron. And so, in talking about the fact that my favorite director is James Cameron, then I will pick a film from him because I have a lot of favorite films. I don't think a film lover has one.
That's the thing. I don't think
You know?
any person who loves film, it's like any architect, doesn't have one favorite.
Yeah, so I think the Avatar series is quite nice. I really enjoy them.
Mm-hmm.
I think they are really exciting in terms of the world creation and sort of the dual sort of perspective of different worlds, realms, and also the characters in the worlds are really fascinating. I think it's one of.
So what do you so besides like the world, like it's like in general, if somebody's like, oh, but why? Because if they like, I don't like Avatar, like what makes Avatar great for you?
So wait, Chad, you don't like Avatar?
He's trying to get me to convince him to like it.
Yeah, if like let's in this scenario say that Chad doesn't like Avatar. Why should Chad give Avatar a second opinion or second look?
I think the idea of imagination, the idea of a person who is able to think out of what we understand the world to be, or what we understand the human sort of relations to be, and sort of be able to almost take himself out of this world to be in a different world. But he constantly talks about how it is actually informed by daily stuff. He talks about the last Avatar and the character, forgotten the name of the character, the female character, as his mother. The fact that his mother has this almost like a patriarchy sort of character and has this authority and this feminine sort of character, and how he almost kind of transferred that into this fictional character. For me, it's fascinating.
Period.
Yes.
Yeah.
For me, it's really fascinating to think about how he's able to almost take something very simple. Like, so I've listened to him talk about the Terminator, right?
And I love the Terminator.
Right?
Who doesn't love the Terminator?
Who doesn't love the Terminator? And for me, I think his imagination and the way he thinks about the world, I think is why I love his films.
And honestly, as somebody that loves the Terminator and a lot of James Cameron's films, I see the world building that he is besides action sequences, he's exceptional in world building.
Yeah.
Like really great in world building. Vree?
What are you going to say before? I think you were going to you wanted to say something.
No, I think I'll save it for later because
Okay.
it's yeah, I'll save it for later because we can flesh it out a bit further.
Yeah,
Okay.
no. On my side, I think I do appreciate directors like James Cameron, but I think if I have to think of where my love for film started, I have to think back to when I was a child and I was reading books. And I would read a lot of Roald Dahl books, and these Roald Dahl books allowed me to build the world or create the world from text. And I think that building of the world in my mind from text really, I guess, expanded my imagination. So one of the, I guess, animated versions of a Roald Dahl book would be like James and the Giant Peach, or even something as simple as Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I had a relationship between the text that I had read, the text that I had read versus now what was reimagined for me in cinema. And I think that level of world building was just phenomenal, because something about text to, I guess the 3D or visual media to represent it. I found it quite elusive and intriguing. And in the story of James and the Giant Peach, it's a story about a little boy who unfortunately lost his parents and was adopted by two horrible aunts. And he finds a peach and he grows inside it. It was just so imaginative for me. And I think from there, that's where I started to understand a lot of spatial nuances, because now James became small and then the peach became big. It's almost as if I started to understand scale quite a bit from that movie. And then going into my adulthood, I started enjoying movies such as Sin City, such as Kill Bill. I was into kind of like a story that had a very linear yet complex narrative. The complexity in the narrative, even movies like Pulp Fiction, and I'm speaking of the same director. I know it's a lot of Tarantino, but essentially the way he tells his stories and the way he builds worlds, it's not probably as grandeur from a graphic perspective as Avatar, but it's complex from the way he's layered people's characters and the environments and even the cuts and the scenes to almost tell that story, and the humor embedded in it. I found that level of world building quite intriguing, actually, just coming from an animation, from a book to animation, then to something like Tarantino.
What do you think about Spirited Away?
Oh, love Spirited Away. You are going in. Studio Ghibli is actually one of my favorite studios for film, because Spirited Away, that's where that's where I started having my love for anime. Because Spirited Away was able to capture the surrealistic kind of world where things where people were exaggerated, like the world that was created was exaggerated, but also it forced the child to feel emotions in an extreme way. There's extreme anger, extreme frustration, and extreme kind of sadness, because I think the way the story is told and the layers of Spirited Away, you go through so many emotions as a child, and maybe children shouldn't watch Spirited Away. But
I think just on touching on that, I think as human beings, we, especially from a young age, we experience a lot of things in terms of feelings. Feelings is one of the first things that you experience as a child. And what I love about specifically Spirited Away, maybe not 100% Spirited Away, but like films like it, is that you experience love, you experience fear, you experience excitement and joy. If you know what they are and can identify them, then you can have quote unquote better control over them. And I think that's the great thing about film, especially from a young child, like a child's age. This is going to sound really crazy and corny, but like something like Dragon Ball Z. As many of us grew up watching Dragon Ball Z, and yes, it still fits under the cinematic conversation. Anime and cartoons, they all give you that sense of joy and excitement and that euphoric experience. And like as you like realize this, and I think that's also where nostalgia comes into play, is that you realize that oh, I understand this feeling as an adult. I understand this feeling because I experienced it while watching Goku or
Yeah.
a Hayao Miyazaki film or the Looney Tunes. In an adult, then you can actually control that and how you can like kind of disseminate, or if it's a good thing at the moment or if it's a bad thing at the moment. And that's the great thing about film in general, is that it gives you that
And
understanding.
for me, like even my love for films, when I think of, especially when we were running the unit 20, where we were exploring this idea of film and architecture. And anytime you kind of ask a student about their favorite film, I don't know, for some reason it feels as if because they are into architecture, few films you know they're going to talk about Inception.
Yeah.
They're going to
Typical.
talk the typical.
Yeah.
But for me, I was really not inspired by those films architecturally. Yes, it's there. And people talk about Blade Runner, people talk about, it's like the typical architectural films. But for me, it's really the narrative aspect of film that excites me, right?
Yeah.
And so even sometimes when I'm watching a film, my wife doesn't like watching films with me, because I'm always kind of talking about what was the director thinking,
Yeah. Yeah.
what was the writer thinking,
Yeah.
even when I'm watching Bridgerton,
Yes.
for example, I'm thinking about the layered narrative and the narrative and why they make certain decisions,
Yeah.
So for me, it's interesting. Like, I think when we're talking about architecture, a film as architects, and so far, the both of us have not even mentioned Inception or Blade Runner. I think it's fascinating.
I think I would be the one to mention Shutter Island before I mention Inception. Actually,
Yeah.
if I'm looking at a Leonardo DiCaprio movie, because like I said, I'm into the complexity of the narrative, and the complexity of the narrative in Shutter Island. I enjoy being tricked. I enjoy being feeling like at the end of the movie I actually don't know what happened. I don't know what the truth is.
You like
I like that
cliffhanger.
cliffhanger, but I also like the mysterious. That's why a lot of films I'm into are murder mystery films. Currently, I'm into a lot of problem-solving films where we are now trying to actively, as participants, as audience, are actively trying to also resolve and figure out what's going on in the film. So I think as I grow older, the more I appreciate the audience, or me being the audience participating in the film. It feels like we're collaborating with the director. And I think, to your point, films like Inception, there's nothing actually wrong with the film. I don't think I was inspired by it at that time that it came out, but I do understand why a lot of people do get inspired by it from an architectural perspective. But if you look at a lot of the references that we used in our unit, you'd find like Psycho by Alfred Hitchcock. Actually, Alfred Hitchcock.
He is your
Martin
favorite.
Scorsese.
You talk about him.
Alfred Hitchcock. Alfred Hitchcock is just one of, I think it was one of the greatest directors of our time at that time, and even Martin Scorsese, and we can even go on. But essentially, I think there's a lot of depth in the way the story is told and how it shifts the atmosphere. And I think that's the quality that we were trying to bring out, is that the character, as a character in space, that's what creates the atmosphere, not necessarily 100% the atmosphere as a shell on its own. I think people essentially then are the mechanism that drive the quality of space. And I think that's what we were trying to get at, is that it's about the people. And I think that's the beauty of that.
So then this brings me to a question that's possibly very difficult to answer. Is like, what is the relationship between architecture and film?
But before that, Chad needs to tell us what his favorite film is.
He hasn't told us what his favorite film is.
He's trying to run away from it.
How are you running away from a question?
I mean,
Sir.
I have many.
Yeah.
And like you guys, I have many. I love The Matrix. I love Blade Runner. I love the original Star Wars series. I love
I can see his type.
everything, almost everything that Wes Anderson has done.
That's
You
a good
know,
one.
and I'm trying to steer away from Wes Anderson because it's
Why?
very clear why his work is very architectural. I mean, it's symmetry, it's the color palette,
Yeah.
There's a lot of control.
Yeah.
He has a lot of
a
control.
lot of control.
There isn't enough room for error in a Wes Anderson film, actually, and it's
No.
intentional error.
No. But
Yeah.
I also love silly comedies. And I think silly comedies, and we don't have enough of them. Honestly, we won't dwell too much on the state of
Yeah.
film at the moment, but like something like as recent as Happy Gilmore 2. It was a silly comedy that showcased a lot of not necessarily architectural but character development within that world that was created. And I think there's a lot that we can take from there. So in essence, my favorite movies are varied. They're very varied.
We all,
We all have
I know.
very.
but we were able to say
But we
something.
are-
I think
able to say why.
for years, my favorite has always been, and number one on my list has been The Matrix.
The Matrix.
The Matrix. I can even say one of my favorite. I think it was Ants.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the movie Ants.
A lot of people ask, why is the Grand Budapest Hotel a good movie?
There are many reasons why it's a good movie.
So yeah,
But we are going to answer that from an architectural perspective,
yes, which is fine.
which is fine. Beyond everything that Wes Anderson does great, i.e. cinematography, symmetry, the color palettes, the everything. He's the characters and the story that inhabit that world are in themselves a feat of greatness.
Yeah,
But can we agree that the Grand Budapest Hotel is a murder mystery?
it is.
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
I mean,
It is.
yes, I think, yeah. I mean, current murder mysteries, is even like Knives Out, the series Knives Out, takes a lot from Grand Budapest.
I haven't watched that.
You haven't seen it yet?
No.
Yeah, you should
We have three at
actually.
the
There's three at the
Oh,
moment.
really?
They're
I've tried to look
available.
at it.
You should stream them. I think they're quite interesting.
I'll have a look.
No, yeah.
I haven't watched films in a while, actually. It's quite interesting that we're talking about films today, because today when I was leaving, my wife was like, "We need to go for a movie tonight."
Oh
Like,
wow!
Go for a movie
What
date.
movie are you
I have
thinking
no
of?
idea. I have no idea. Like, I wanted to watch the Jackson movie because but I haven't watched it. But she doesn't want to watch that, so I don't know what she's thinking. But I haven't watched a movie in a while because I've been busy
Yeah,
up and down. Yeah. Yeah. So your question
You wanna
again? Back to
say?
your question.
What did you
So
say?
my
Architecture film?
question is, you guys are schooling.
Sorry.
My question is, what makes film architectural and architecture like an easy
Cinematic.
medium to be cinematic?
Can I start?
Yes.
I think if we look at what architecture is from an architectural medium perspective, from a very simplistic layman's term basis, the mediums that we utilize to represent and to draw architecture are pen, paper, pen, paper, or pencil paper, or whatever digital software essentially printed on paper. I think the act of creating architecture starts from drawing. And I think the very close relationship between architecture from a filmic perspective and architecture from a productive buildings perspective is that we all start with drawing. And just having that in common creates the strength and the basis of why architecture and film could actually have strong links, because our beginning is essentially in the same space. We're using the same mediums. And what ends up happening is that how we then start to build our architectural drawings is almost in the same processes that the director or producer or writer starts to build stories, because they start by thinking of what is it that they want the story to be.
Yeah.
And we're thinking what do we want the building typology to be, for instance. I think when it comes to the conceptual process of a building from a very layman's, like I said, term or basis, we start from the same place.
Do we start from the place? I mean, in my mind, I think, couldn't we say the place that we start from is more of like the story,
Yes.
a story,
A story is.
a story as in what is driving this project, you know,
The brief.
the brief
Yes.
as a story,
As a story,
could be like
The
almost
invisible brief.
the invisible, could probably be like almost something that holds this project, you know, that we want to bring to life, you know. I also think for me, I think one of the biggest things is this idea of sequence, because
Interesting.
if you think of a building is not experienced at a goal. A building is experienced in different stages, in different sections and frames. The same way as you watch a film. Like as you're watching a film, you cannot understand the totality of the film until you've gone through all the frames
Interesting.
or all the sequences, right? And so for me, I think that is almost like one of the reasons why this connection is there. That to understand the building, you have to go through the sequence of the spaces or the frames of the spaces, right? And a very like successful design building at every given moment or every given frame or sequence might tell you something, might tell you a certain story, or you know.
What's also quite interesting to add to what you're saying, Dixon, is I believe architecture is completely political.
Yes.
The same way I believe film is actually
Very highly political. Yeah.
completely political.
Yeah.
And I think from the basis of that, it helps us draw links and threads through within each other, within each other's realms.
Yeah.
And as we, I think we also reduce film to just a medium. And I think we also reduce architecture to just drawing. We've done this thing where we reduce these bodies to the bare minimums, but actually within them, it's actually quite a complex field.
Yeah.
And I think when the two come together, they become best friends. You know, they can learn from each other. But I'm sure we're going to dive deeper into how they learn from each other. But when you're asking what we found as a link or why film and architecture, what is your perspective on this?
So when I was studying, there was a lot of talk about architectural films. Certain films are more architectural than others.
Yeah.
And you can believe that, you know, certain buildings are more architectural than others. I mean, functionality versus design aesthetics. You can argue that. We can argue that for a very long time.
Yeah.
For me, and I think doing a project in varsity was that I chose to be a filmmaker in one specific project.
Okay.
I was the director, and then the client was perhaps the producer. And there was a lot of different things. The camera, like we shoot cameras, I mean, taking even as practical as visualizing, taking those camera shots, setting all of us up to tell a narrative. A lot of the times architecture tells narratives in the way and you said it, they frame the building and you experience the building. I think just like any other art form, architecture and film, like Veronica saying, is intrinsically not only where they start from the same, but where they end the same as well. Because you are experiencing it. You are experiencing someone else's vision.
Yeah.
And that's the great thing about that's a great thing about it, just like art and visual arts, but there's a deeper collaboration with architecture and film. One person can make a film, but more often than not, a team makes film.
Yeah.
And the same thing can be said with architecture. That's just the practicalities of it. And I think if you even, if we take Inception and even like Blade Runner, worlds are built, even Avatar, worlds are built, even Avatar, which is basically taking place on the jungle planet. There is architectural thinking,
Yeah.
how you frame the shot,
Yeah.
where the shot takes place. The Hallelujah Mountains in the sky is a great architectural ideal for us architects designing without gravity.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of overlap. A lot of overlap. I mean, even like texture, like as a film, you can't really feel texture. But what they do is they introduce mood in terms of sound, lighting, you know, kind of those kind of things. And many times in architecture, you don't it's not a hard and fast rule, but not all architecture experience allows you to experience sound. Yet there is sound that is inherent in spaces, whether you are filling it or it is being filled and pumped in. So for me, architecture and film have, since my early days of varsities, has never been separated. Even something like, I can tell if there's for me the worst violation of any architecture is being boring, right? And the worst violation of any film is being boring. Give me something interesting, even if I don't 100% agree with it, there needs to be something that engages us within that medium.
Yeah. You know, as we're talking about film, like, I'm just kind of, there are a couple of things running in my head, right? One of the things is, I remember when we were running the unit, and there was a lot of question of, why are we watching too much films? When are we going to create architecture? But at every single year we ran the unit, there were concerns, but at the end we created more architecture than almost
Every other year.
yeah. We just ended up creating architecture. And what I realized is that actually, anytime you are watching film, you are in space. You know what I mean? Like, your mind is transported into a certain realm. And so even though people did not understand why we were asking students to watch and analyze film a lot, what they didn't understand is that students were in space. They were analyzing architecture and analyzing film at the same time for a very, very long time. And so when they came back and we said, what is the architecture? What is the architectural typology? They were not lost because they were in the same space. They were in film and architecture at the same time. So I hear you when you talk about this thing of you've always seen it as one thing. I didn't see it like that until we experimented it. You know, my dad had a cinema, but I never kind of connected the two together growing up until we experimented it. We experimented it because for me it was just an interest. It was just a love for film and architecture. You're like, oh, what will happen if you bring it together? And in bringing it together in the beginning, because we were architects and we were not filmmakers, we wanted to spend so much time to understand film. And so we gave a lot of time for the students to understand film in a certain way. But there were concerns. People were like, oh, this is not a film school. But then because of what you're saying, that actually this thing is almost like intertwined with each other. We were never outside architecture.
Yeah.
We were always inside architecture, which is interesting. Yeah.
I think one while we were teaching, one film that had just come out maybe 2 years before we started teaching was a film named Birdman. It's an independent film, and what was interesting about it was that the cameraman followed the character so closely behind, and it was a lot of the times first person shot. And the cameraman managed to pick up the nuances of human movement. And us trying to kind of help a student understand the power of the camera, the lens, the gaze. In our studio, I think helped quite a bit. We had a student in our first year who ended up making a film going through the Constitutional Court.
Yes, I remember that.
In that same first person camera shot. And she was able to pick up every movement that a human, as short as her film ended up being, she did very well because we could feel could feel that film based on what she was able to capture, even though it was an animation, and she captured the breath, the very slow, like the pause,
it was beautiful,
the pondering. I think getting a student to be that close to character building and narrative building helps them then design the space more intimately. And I think the intimacy between what we find in film and architecture is so important, because I think what film helps us do is to essentially see, right?
Yeah.
And what architecture does is to help us actually like experience and to be immersed. And you can be immersed in a film, but you can also be immersed in architecture, because I think architecture is highly immersive. The danger that I'm seeing that architects do, and probably why I think architecture needs a little bit more more of a cinematic kind of approach, is that we end up creating objects without the understanding of the user, right? The end user at the end. And I think what cinema helps us do is that they detail the user to the point that the space then becomes perfect for that user.
So what you're actually, I feel like what you're both actually saying is that architecture is a character on its own. In cinema.
It is 100%.
It is. It is.
So how would one flesh that out within that medium?
You mean as a student?
As a human, as anybody.
I think the idea of film in relation to architecture, and how this idea of the characters have like a feeling. There's a sense of feeling. There's a sense of where it belongs, the atmospheres that it belongs, the world that it belongs in, and how it feels. So to think about architecture as a character, what feeling is it giving? What is the atmospheric qualities of this character? You know? What is the role of this character?
The character build-up, essentially.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think when we begin to think about architecture in that sense, then you begin to think about it just beyond just a shelter. But it begins to have these qualities, you know? I think for me, that's where it becomes very interesting, that the spaces have almost like characteristics of what it meant, what it's supposed to be.
I think there's a movie that I just remembered that we used a lot in our studio, and you said that I loved this movie so much. It's an indie film, because I also like indie films. It's called I Think I Lost My Hand. I think.
Yes.
I always talk about it. It's about a man who loses their hand. It's an animation. It's French. It's a French indie film. A man loses his hand, and then his hand essentially then becomes the character that travels through the city. And the hand the camera is able to follow the entire story at the scale of the hand. And what this hand goes through is there's a lot of trauma, there's a lot of humor, and then there's also an emotional connection to the life-size character, to another life-size character. But what we're able to do is to tell such a relatable story through just the character of the hand, and the architecture participates in holding and hosting and carrying this hand through the city. And I think one thing that we kept saying is that as much as we would speculate something like a hand going through a city, it needed to still be related to something real. And
Yeah.
I think that's the beauty of speculation and what film essentially is.
Yeah.
It's speculation.
Yeah.
And what we've done in the past with our experiment, I'll call it the experimental studio,
Unit
is
20, the
we started to
experiment.
see how architecture then became speculative.
Yeah.
Because if film could be speculative, then surely architecture to some degree, or maybe to a certain stage, is highly speculative.
Very.
And that is where I think our underpinnings then started to really,
Sort of
grasp
develop,
and
yeah.
develop and come to an understanding is that the speculative always lands and is based on the real.
And that, for me, I think that's the beauty.
Yeah.
And the thing that we kept saying to students is that the speculative should be believable.
Yeah.
Because the speculative is connected to the real.
Yes.
So you can't come and tell us the hula baloos and then we don't understand where does this sit in society. You know, I remember as we're talking about this reference of the hand, that film, it reminds me of Rebecca's film of The Frog. The Frog in the City, right? And she created this short film with the perspective of a frog in the city because she was interested in animals in the city and what it means, and how she documented that and how the frog is crossing the road and what it means, the dangers of the road. It was a beautiful. You should check Unit 20's YouTube video and check it out. I think you will like it. But it was really, really nice, So for me, I think just to kind of change everything that you're saying, I'll come back to that. But something just comes to my mind. When we talk about films, we talk a lot about Western films,
Yeah, we do.
right? And I remember when we were running the unit, there was a lot of feedback and criticism about why are you guys not looking at African films?
Yeah.
Like right now, if you ask me what's my favorite African film, it's gonna be very difficult. And I wonder why is that? Like I know I've changed the whole topic, like the whole
Now we're
conversation.
going to go into
Trajectory of the podcast.
the
Yeah.
politics of African cinema in Africa.
Yeah, like it's like a lot of African films are very political. The good African films,
But also, I've still noted that a lot of those that you're referencing are still European Africans and Western
Yes.
Africans acting in Africa, which
Yes.
is currently something that British, American, Black American actors are currently complaining about. Why basically Hollywood hires British African actors to act and retell their stories. And there's a whole discussion about this, and I think we relate to the same degree that we have this platform here in South Africa. Or let's just take the whole continent. However, we still reach out somehow to either the Western kind of film universe to act out our stories, to act out for our stories. And no matter what,
it's a very interesting space. I mean,
But it's the same thing. You're gonna be hard pressed to name a Bollywood film that you really love and really reference. I think the idea and this also really applies to architecture is like how a lot of our thinking and education is based in a Western kind of architectural framework. And there's a lot of work to be done to integrate the Eastern, the African, the non-Westernized framework and thinking. I mean, we've spoken a lot about like some of our favorite films, and many of them are Western, some Eastern. But and each like people group tells stories differently. And I think there's a lot of value in thinking in those kind of fashions, we just need to put in a lot of effort
Yeah.
as not just the three of us, but like even in our discourse, in our thinking, in our entertainment and watching. We have to kind of like search and like curate and kind of like pull through a lot of these ideas.
I think, Chad, what you're touching on is something so interesting, because I find myself more intrigued with essentially Asian films, right?
Yeah.
So South
I also
Korean,
like Asian films.
South Korean, either whether it's K-dramas or South Korean stories or films, and listening or watching them in their original mother tongue and reading subtitles. I find that as I find that as an interesting space to be in, and how I could possibly access and enjoy that movie is only in the language it was so intended to be in. And then I, the user that is not speaking that language, needs to read the subtitles. So I believe that in South Africa, we've got many TV shows, and now we've got Netflix interested in our stories, interested in South African stories, interested in the space, and interested in the language. I think slowly but surely it is coming. It is coming. As we may be late to the party in terms of, you know, our I guess archive and how many films. For instance, Come Back Africa. It was in the late 1950s. It was Martin Scorsese. The late Miriam Makeba was in that film, and it's a very architectural film.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it was mostly in English. And it was mostly in English, and I love that film thoroughly, but I think if they had to remake that film and tell it in the language as well, I think there's power in that, because now the land that you're filming in and the language in the land is so important, also important to keep. And I think how the way in which now stories are being told in this land, as much as we don't have as many as maybe Nollywood is way ahead of us. And maybe even Ghanaian films are way ahead of us. You can tell us more about Ghanaian film. But I think essentially I went around the world just to say that I think we are getting there. Slowly but surely we're getting there.
You know, I think also like one of the, I really like what you said. I think this idea of language becomes very important. I think there's almost the need to want to please the global market. I mean, the film we made with Nipo, Dream Call. I think we should have Nipo on the podcast. The film that we made called Dream Call, we were in a lot of minds about the language, and we were actually struggling to get, you know, actors that could speak Twi, the Ashanti language. But it was one of the things that as a storyteller and as the person who had the story, I decided I'm not negotiating on that. I said, I need this to be authentic as possible. We need to have a Ghanaian act this out. And so at a point, we had to kind of make a trick, kind of a way where the brothers, one was constantly speaking English and the other one was speaking the mother tongue, the Ghanaian language, my mother tongue, which is Twi. But for me, it was really about keeping the authenticity of the story, and not to say that, well, we wanted to do well in every festival or whatever, so let's use English. It was really about the originality of the story. So for me, it becomes very interesting. Like there's a film called I Told You So. It's a Ghanaian film by a director called Kwao Ansa, right? It is like one of the most beautiful domestic cultural films I've watched. And this film was in Ghanaian language, right? It was so beautiful. And I think like if I should think about that film remade like today, with today's contemporary issues or whatever, what it will be, what it will mean, you know, spatially, what it will mean culturally, you know, what it will mean to hold this narrative, you know. But it is very difficult, like the space we find ourselves in Africa. It's almost like we're trying to tell the stories, but there's always almost this pressure to say, do we live? And I think South Africans are doing well. Like if you watch series and stuff on Netflix,
the movie series in December that
Exactly.
happen every December,
Yeah.
there's something of a romantic nature or rom-com nature that is something to look forward to, which
Yeah.
I think they're breaking also the stigma around Africa always having traumatic, sad, or
Yes.
kind of
Dystopian kind of
political
like-
dystopian stories due to our history.
Yeah.
Our history in the continent is quite traumatic as it stands, but I think there's a stigma around how we tell stories, and the ones that got the most clout usually were in the past the ones that were speaking about something
traumatic, yeah.
and I think us breaking out of that and trying to depict joy, trying
Yeah.
to depict love, trying to depict like excitement. I think it's giving the entire continent a different taste.
That's the great thing about film is the genres.
Yeah.
The genres also within the global kind of cinematic idea and thinking is that each genre holds a specific narrative.
Yeah.
Like rom-coms, as an example. Rom-coms show that there is a future for the humanity. And it's crazy thing to say, I know, but like comedy and levity is something that gives us joy. And then romance is something that gives us intimacy.
Yeah.
And obviously like the offspring that comes from that. But there's the sense of looking towards the future with a rom-com. And I agree, like the fact that the South Africa is producing a lot of good rom-com, good, genuinely good.
Yeah.
And it's in our vernacular languages.
Yeah.
It shows that that as a society we cannot be stuck.
Yeah.
We can't
Yeah.
be stuck in just thinking about our oppressive past.
Yeah.
We have to be thinking like towards the future, and I think architecture is also leaning towards that. I would love to believe that, and I think it is happening. Is that we are not just building and quote unquote celebrating the past.
Yeah.
There is a thinking of what can we as a society do for the future, and that's the beauty of architecture and film, is that it brings out so many conversations.
How connected is like the thinking of making of films to the development of a society, or the freedom of imagination and creating of films, and its connection to like a third world or a first world? How do you think it influenced? Because like most of the films that we watch from the West, majority of them doesn't even have like a moral. It's just imagination. It's either we want you to laugh, or we want you to think that you're a superhuman, or you know what I mean? Like there's this freedom of dreaming.
It's also privilege, right?
Yeah.
I think it's also privilege. There's freedom and there's privilege, and I think I never want to say that it's not getting there. I think we will get there. For instance, I believe that in South Africa we can create a story about a superhero that will rescue the world, or that we can create similar-esque stories. I think we've got the capabilities. I think what's missing is just obviously from a financial perspective, all of these other worlds, someone to do it. Someone just needs to do it. I mean, it could be us that does it. It could be us that does it.
Watch out.
Watch out, yeah.
But I think
Speaking student.
I think we can, because essentially there's nothing that we cannot do. A friend of mine was telling me not so long ago is that one thing that the GSA told us as a student is that you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, you can.
You can do whatever you want. You can be whoever you want. And I think that is something so encouraging that is cool, that the school embodies and allows you to experience anything. There's a freedom there. And I think that's what a lot of the Western culture is living in that freedom to just use what you have, find the resources, make it happen, and do what you want. I think we're getting there. We should. And And I don't see anything outside of finances. I don't see anything else really stopping us.
I really like how, I mean, when I was studying, almost like every stage of my architectural sort of studies, I have an architect that I sort of study or like or admire the work, and then he moved to somebody else. And at a point, the person that I really loved was Bjarke Ingels. And I love Bjarke Ingels not because of the scale of the work he does, because for me, I think sometimes the scale is too big, you know. But I like his work because of his thinking about what architecture is. He always often talks about architecture as the science fiction, the realization of science fiction into the world. And I think because of that thinking, he almost plays against the rules of architecture or the rules of what should be and what should not be. And I think that's also one of the powerful things about film when you bring it to architecture, because it asks you to, what it does is that it asks you to question, why are we doing the things the way we're doing it?
Because Sans 10400 told us to.
Exactly. Right? And I remember, like, he's got this building where exactly like he was questioning this idea of the Sans 10400 about the boundary line, right? And so he had to twist the building in the sense that the building on the ground is adhering to the Sans, is adhering to the regulation. So it's not passing the boundary, but when it goes certain height in the sky, it passes the, you know what I mean? But it has to go a certain height. But it's fiction, you know. It's like taking reality and twisting it upside down. For me, I think that is
actually quite a life size example of when cinema and architecture meet.
Exactly,
they meet in such really in genuine experiences. I think different countries have expressed this very differently. I think we in South Africa are obviously dealing with different contexts, such as a heritage council, such as SANS, and we'll talk about this in another podcast. But I think we haven't yet explored or tested our creative or the boundaries creatively as much yet. I think I was going to say something else, but I'm trying to say that I think as architects, what film allows us to do is to test the boundaries creatively, or test and kind of experiment with the boundaries a little bit, and push and pull and stretch it out, because the imagination in film shows us that it's possible. We just now need to start realizing some of these in our land. But I think I mean, we could go on another hour forever.
But I think if you had to summarize your experience of architecture and film, whether it's in the unit system or your own experiences, what do you want people to take from this kind of conversation?
You can be whatever you want to be. You can do what you want to do, because I think what is impossible in the natural world
is possible in film.
Is possible in film. And I think if we can make it in the film, then and now dissect that film backwards, we can make quite remarkable work.
Beautiful.
If we can use film as a testing field, as well as an explorative field, as well as a speculative field, all those words are so beautiful to use. But if we could use that to just get our brains and our creativity flowing, and then place it back onto the ground, I think we would actually create something
amazing
quite remarkable.
Oh, what would I say? There are films that were recommended to me when I was studying and when I was teaching. Films like Roma, Grand Budapest Hotel, the film that I mentioned about, I Told You So, the Ghanaian film. That those I think for me, the thinking is that there is so much that we can get from film that it doesn't have to be a certain type of film. It doesn't have to be a world building sort of a film. Like if you watch Roma is really about the domestic. It's really about the detail. It's about time. It's about dragging time.
And violence.
And you know what I mean? And so for me, I think that if you sort of switch on your cinematic eyes or your architectural lenses when you're watching a film, regardless of it not being a typical architectural film as Inception or the Blade Runner or whatever it is, there's so much that we can learn. For me, it's about the narrative. The narrative for me, I think, is very, very important, and how that narrative help us to reinterpret spaces or reimagine spaces. Yeah, for me, I think it becomes very interesting to think about it in that way, that every film can give you something, I think.
And I think the narrative keeps us as the author.
Yeah.
I think it keeps us in play. It's so important that, if we keep narrative or storytelling in a bit of the forefront, not that as the only thing, but something in the front, then we are allowing ourselves to constantly become the author of this and have that space. And I know a lot of things are happening with AI and, technology taking over so many spheres and departments. But here we've got the ability to be the author and test it out. And I think that's a remarkable thing.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, that's all from us, I guess. That's a lot to think about, and that's a lot to leave people with. So I don't want to overload them. But
I feel like once in a while we should talk about film and architecture, because I think that there's a lot to talk about.
There's a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
So it could be a recurring segment.
Yeah, it could be.
We
Could be.
But yeah. But thank you, Dixon, Veronica. That was very entertaining.
Nice.
So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
And we are
In frame.
in frame.